All right, Megan. So today we have Brian Metzler on the show. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little background from my perspective about you, Brian. So we don't really even need you here. I'll just tell people. So when I first started reviewing shoes and doing stuff, it was kind of like fumbling my way around, and there were some pros already in the business, and one of them was Brian, and I felt like when I met Brian, and it's not that there's a huge age difference between us or anything, but I remember the first time I saw him, and I think it might have been at the running event, and I felt like a freshman when the seniors are walking around. Like Brian's confident, he's talking to brands, they know who he is. He's, obviously knows what he's doing, and I'm looking like that geek who's lost in the hallway trying to find somebody to eat lunch with. But I've always looked up to Brian, and at the same time, like he's written a book about it, Kicksology. If you haven't checked that out, check that out. And today I hope to learn more about Brian, why he's interested in shoes. Although if you read the book, you'll find out why. And then we'll get into the garbage. Was that the longest intro we've ever had?
Probably.
All right, Brian, you still there?
Much appreciated. Good, thank you guys. Yes, I'm happy to be here. Let's talk about geeking. We're all geeks, right? We're all running geeks. We're all somewhere always like that freshman or eighth grader that doesn't know anything about anything, and we just like to have fun.
Yeah, I love it that we all kind of start off like we were talking about this on the podcast that will probably air this Friday. Or it would have already aired. Anyway, it's hard to tell time and space-time continuum. We all start off running in the wrong shoe, and I think that's why we get so interested in shoes, because you know what difference a good shoe makes in the enjoyment of the sport. And one of my favorites is when you start off your book, you talk about running in the Air Max. I know exactly which one it is. And like you always can tell someone new to a running group by looking at their shoes. And if they're wearing something like that, you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think now we're seeing this whole new growth of running, post-pandemic for whatever reason. There's a lot of factors, but there's so many shoes out there, right? The difference is now there's a lot more good shoes or better shoes with good foams, and they're lighter and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that the average runner, the novice runner, right? Just the realistic person who wants, hey, I'm going to train for a half marathon, doesn't know what they want, right? They just go and get a shoe and they start running.
Well, and it's interesting because now there is some confusion. While you say all the shoes are good now, I agree with you. That a lot of them are, but the rise of lifestyle running shoes, some people don't know the difference. Like I'll see somebody running in like a New Balance 75 or 574, whatever it is, or 990 V6 or something like that. And you're just like, hey, I know they look like running shoes, but not so much.
Yeah. I think it's curious as to why or how people choose shoes. Obviously the internet has changed everything. I still think that going to your local running store is going to help you get a shoe that fits your foot and fits your gait and all that stuff. But I think that running shoes are everywhere now, right? You can buy them on your phone, obviously, and there's no rhyme or reason. People shop by brand or people shop by color, right? And
color, yeah.
That's great. But people go through an entire either cycle of training, like again, that first half marathon or even the next half marathon, even if it's someone who's been running. And there's not a lot of, until people that are like really runner geeky putting information out, there's no real kind of instruction manual on how to be a runner or how to buy shoes. There's just tons of shoes out there and like, oh, I like that one. Right. And what does that mean? Right.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Okay. Before we get too nerdy and into the shoe stuff, I know Thomas kind of gave you an intro or whatever that was. But can we get your origin into the space? Like when did running start for you? How did you get into this industry? Where did it all begin?
Okay, yeah, sure. So as a runner, I was like a middle school cross country runner, and then high school track runner I was probably a decent track runner, middle distance runner. And then I was a walk on in college. And then after college, I was like, there's no real thing for that. So I was running 5Ks around Chicago still. Up in Chicago here with Deep Dish Pizza. And then I moved to Boulder, and all of a sudden I discovered trail running, right? And that changed my world. And everything took a back seat to trail running. And the more I got into it, right? And it's just a fascinating different world. And I still love track. I still love road running, but I mostly am trail running now, and that's just kind of how my my running evolved and led to other things too. But as far as professional background, I was a journalist, initially a newspaper journalist, as everyone was, right? And then that turned into a bunch of different things. I was writing for magazines. I got the chance to start Trail Runner magazine. And then since then, I've been immersed in the running media space since then, and it's been like 20 some years now. And I worked for Rodale, Running Times, Runner's World, and then Competitor Group when Competitor Group was pushing out a lot of running content tied to their running events and stuff. And then did a couple of their startup things, and then now I'm tied with the conglomerate of Outside, which is doing more running. And along the way, I've been a freelance writer, books, articles on my own, stuff like that. So, I've written about a lot of different stuff aside from running, but I love running, and that's what I do all the time. So, and then along the way, to your point, I mean, yeah, I just as I wrote in my book, running shoes became this thing. Long before I knew they were a thing, right? There was some identity for me to be a runner, and I love that. But I also identified those moments that I had with running shoes. I'm like, I'm not really a gear guy, believe it or not, but I do recall the moments that I had, like in seventh grade cross country, having a good race and the shoes I wore, and like that went on, and I still feel that way. I still kind of identify like a great run with, that shoe fits really well or works really well for that terrain, and so it's kind of a mixed thing. It's definitely a touchy feely thing for me, but it's also appreciating the evolution of good running shoes. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where I went. I mean, like journalist, runner, and shoe geek kind of like kept spiraling, and here I am talking to you guys.
Yeah, let's do some name dropping real quick, because I've been at trail races where there's little cliques that drop out of the trail race and go and do hikes and stuff afterwards, and it's always like star-studded, and somehow you always seem to get the invite. Can you give us some of the names of some of the people that you've run trails with that you've gotten to share those in Boulder?
I mean, Buzz Burrell is like a local legend. He was around when I kind of started trail running. He's done a lot of great things. Peter Backward, those guys actually started the FKT movement. Tons of guys like that. Dave Mackey's a good friend of mine. He's been a legend. He had a bad injury a couple years ago, but he's still doing great things. A lot of the Boulder scene guys. Jurek lives here now, but like there's been a lot of people that have come through Boulder that have done a lot of great things that I'm happy to tag along with. We've had a Thursday night running group for a long time that is a mix of like just novice runners, average runners, and then champion 100-milers, right? And that stuff rubs off on you. It's like you can't help but like learn not only physical things, but also like mental attributes about trail running when you're hanging around and just going for your average Thursday run with those guys.
Yeah, and you've even like Adam Chase, who works for Brooks and helps them develop some of their trail shoes. Probably talks to some other people about trail shoes. He's probably I consider him somewhat of a legend in the sport, even though a lot of people wouldn't know him.
Yeah, so Adam's definitely a legend. I've been friends with him and known him for a long time, and he's another one on that list. He was, even before like trail running really became a thing, I think he was the winningest 50-miler in the country, and really did what he did really well. And then he got into other things, adventure racing and such. But yeah, he's been another shoe dog, shoe geek forever, and he really understands shoes, knows shoes, and certainly a good friend.
It's always interesting because I feel like there's two types of runners. Like I talked to someone like Michael Wardian, who ran for North Face, now runs for Hoka, and he certainly appreciates the Hoka shoe more than he did at the time when he was with North Face, because back then they really didn't have even a road shoe to kind of put on your feet. But he's not like what I would call a shoe geek. And I think that we talk to athletes, and some are like, yeah, whatever you put on my feet, if you say it's good, that's good for me. What do you think is the difference between people who get so into the equipment versus the people that are just like, yeah, whatever, I'll just go for a run, and that's the important part?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it probably spans a whole kind of psychosomatic range that is probably out of my pay grade, but I think that there are athletes, and you can probably take it in any sport, right? In golf, you could probably hand somebody, whether it be a pro golfer or your buddy, and you can give them any club and they could hit a great shot with it, right? And then others are like, no, I need this specific thing. So I think it probably has to do with how those people approach sport and maybe their physical connection to to movement and stuff like that. I think that like I agree that there are athletes who you could put them in anything and they would obviously run fast or run well and do well. But it's hard to say. I think certainly there are athletes who kind of look beyond the footwear, right? And it's more about this bigger picture of them moving through space and maybe it's more, you know, psychological, emotional, and just the beauty of running, the freedom of running is the bigger thing. I think that Wardian, you know, is an example of a guy who has done a lot of crazy, wild things without restriction to anything that else that might be a blockade, right? I mean, you know, as he's gotten older, he's still fast. You know, I think he ran 229 at CIM.
Yeah.
And he's mid 40s now. So yeah, it's
After
definitely
running across the country and still can drop like I think like a 15-minute 5K or something like that.
Yeah, he's phenomenal for sure. And like I've had a lot of fun with him and run with him in a lot of different places, and he's just a good soul, you know. And that's you know, that's part of the beauty of running too, though, right? I mean, like it's not about times or splits or whatever else. It's about the enjoyment and how you pursue this movement called running, right? And it's different for everybody. As much as it's the same, but it's you know, we all have our place of why we do it and what it makes us kind of feel inside.
So I started running kind of like just before I would say super shoes came into the world and carbon fiber plates. So I don't remember that much of a time before that, but obviously you were there. You've like seen this evolution of shoes. Do you feel like the emphasis on shoes is way more extreme than it used to be, especially when it comes to performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think the emphasis you hit that's a key part. The emphasis has changed entirely, and maybe not only because of the materials, because we're night and day from where we were. I mean, like pre, you know, even Boost Foam 2013, which I don't know if Boost was necessarily a super foam, but it was maybe the first new foam, right? And now it's like night and day. And when I've said recently that like all the shoes are pretty good now, they are compared to, so, you know, pre 2013, and let's go back to like 2000, like EVA, there were some PU shoes that were heavier, you know, polyurethane wasn't a great foam, but it could be bouncy, but heavy. But EVA was a thing forever. Right. And the differentiation of how brands made them different were just kind of on the upper of the fit, how light they were and everything else. But if you went back now to some of those shoes, even like 2005, 2007, a lot of shoes were heavier. They were overbuilt. They weren't really built for performance. Certainly there were racing flats, but most of the training shoes were like just gaudy and such. And so
joggers.
I mean, we're in such a different time, but in terms of emphasis, I think social media certainly has changed the emphasis of footwear. And certainly, yes, because there are faster, you know, foams and quicker shoes and carbon plates, that's changed everything. But I just think there's more of a detail on, because of social media, there's more of a vision into everyone's life and what they're doing, what they're wearing, and specifically for running, obviously shoes. And so there's a more acute view of shoes now, and also shoes are a lot better, considerably better than ever before. So it's kind of those two different pieces. But yeah, shoes prior to the super foams, if you think about some of the athletes that ran fast times, like even Steve Jones ran 207 in 1984, 85, and wore a pair of Reeboks with like this thin layer of just what we would consider dead EVA. It's pretty amazing people did that, you know. Or even Derek Clayton way back when, running, you know, sub 209 in a shoe that's basically on the ground, you know. So it is crazy. But then if you fast forward now to seeing the super foams, and it's no doubt that people are running better and faster and obviously recovering more. And it's just like shoes have evolved to a place where it makes everything about running better.
I think when you talk about that, there's certain high points in running shoe technology that shift everything and change everything. And, you know, I almost feel like if I go way back, you can say New Balance changed the running shoe to be more of a jogger. And that was in the 70s when people were like jogging for fitness and they just wanted a shoe that you could go and leave the house. And so they were built up. They had posting. They had all this new technology in the shoes that they thought would be better for runners. So that's one example, I think. And then that was Chase for a while. I, in my mind, know where I feel like during my time of running, where there's like little high points that change the whole game. And I'd love to hear where you think like, though, if you could point out one shoe model that changed everything, and then what came after that?
Wow, that's interesting. I'll start talking through that and come to the answer for you. I do think that there's been key high points. I do think like the 70s when New Balance, like the 320 and the 420 were shoes that like more people used. And then obviously the first Nike Tailwind with Air. It took a long time to get Air to be a thing. And then it wasn't really till Zoom Air in the 90s became actually a more performance oriented, piece of technology. I mean, I think the same with the Asics gel inserts. They were a thing, but they weren't necessarily a performance thing. I think that, and if I think of one shoe, I mean, like, I think that what's the shoe that changed everything in the current version of things. When the first Hokas came out, right, we went from minimalism, which was, cool and purposeful, but also an outlier. And I think when Hoka came out, the first Mafate, that was cool because there was a lot of foam and they were lightweight foams. But I think the Hoka Clifton is what changed things for the mainstream and really put Hoka on the map, and then allowed thicker foams to be lighter, right? And that was that piece. And of course, obviously the carbon plate evolution, was the next part of that. I think there was plenty of shoes that were, around that era. Again, we mentioned the Boost. I thought the original Boost foam was interesting and novel and brought some bounce, but it was also highly unstable and heavy and things like that. So I think right around that era, there was a lot of things happening, but I think what we learned is from Hoka, people like foam, right? It felt good and it was light enough to be that shoe. And that was the Clifton, right? And I think that that kind of changed, or at least set the landscape for what was coming forward. And, from a material science point of view, behind the scenes, there was obviously tons of new foams being developed that came out right after that. And that's why we have all these great super foams now, basically all P-back based, mostly P-back based. But that's really changed the game forever. We'll never go back. Like, there's still EVA derivations around, but I think that that kind of starting point was what really kind of went forward and changed things.
Yeah, that was what was surprising. Like Megan ran the Boston Marathon in the Clifton one when it first came out. And when the Vaporfly came out, you're like, Hoka's got to be the next person to figure this out because they already had the lightweight cushion. Now, if they throw a plate in it, and it took a long time for it to get there. But I'll go back. For me, the first shoe that really changed everything for my running was the Kinvara. Because up until then, you had very heavy built-up shoes. And then they said, okay, let's take what we love about a racing flat, but put enough foam underneath your foot so that your foot isn't going to be hurting after you run. And I felt like for a while there, like you see at the front of all the races now, you'll see Vaporflies or whatever coming in. For a while there in like 2010, 2011, 12, Kinvaras were on the front lines of every marathon. And then also weirdly, the Vibram Five Fingers, I think were part of that whole movement of lighter. And I think when Hoka got it right, it was like, oh, you get the cushioning and the light feel. And that's exactly where everybody's light bulb went off and was like, this works.
Yeah, I'll say that Five Fingers never worked for me because I have an enormously large and long second toe. And so it's gaudy if I were to show it to you. But like, if you remember how those fit, it was based on less of a foot size and more of how your toes kind of filled out those little pockets, right? And so it never worked because if I had the shorter version, like my second toe would be pushing through. And then if I had the longer version, it would be like a gap between my other toes. So, but I think you hit on a couple points there. I think that several things that the minimalist movement did, whether we liked Five Fingers or not, or thought they were funny, I think that like a return to lightness, a return to runnability, right? I think that so many shoes prior to that were just built kind of more for aesthetics and how they looked on the shelf. And like, it was less about running form. At the same time that the minimalist movement happened, there was a lot of return to running form kind of discussions, clinics. Newton Running kind of was built around that same thing.
And the Chi running, the guy from Chi
running, all those things. And so that kind of cued designers, I think, shoe designers or shoe brands to realize, and consumers, then with the advent of cushioning from Hoka, and then with, the first Superfoam, the Adidas Boost, and then onward, I mean, you had this kind of swirling of stuff, and people look at the minimalist movement and think, oh, that was dumb, barefoot running. And maybe it wasn't for everybody for sure, but I think it cued a lot of things where you could then have better running. You could have foam, lightweight materials, and a shoe that was built to run first and foremost. Right. And so since then, we've had this really great advent of kind of performance running shoes, and it's tied to all those things. And if you look at even the Hoka rocker, right? That was tied to that whole notion of a better running gait, right? And then as foams got better, as materials have continued to get better, that we've seen all these brands, put out these great, even everyday trainers, right? And then getting back to the Kinvara, I agree with that. I thought the Kinvara was another first shoe out of that minimalist era that had some of those traits I just mentioned, but with also a really good foam that felt good, and it felt like, okay, it's low to the ground, but it has foam. It had kind of the best of both worlds. And so for a long time, the Kinvara, the first many editions were great until, all of a sudden they had to redesign it because it wasn't what it was, because everything else changed around it.
Yeah, the Latin. Okay, first off, Vibram don't work for me because I looked down at my feet and I was like, I look like a chimpanzee. I can't do this. So I never got into those. I did also, though, at that time, I was reviewing shoes and I was wearing a lot of the Merrell gloves and stuff like that to do workouts, and I ended up breaking a metatarsal, and it was a combination. I was doing too much and in too little shoes, but I remember running the Arizona Marathon. I ran in the fast twitch, and while I love the light feeling, especially late in the marathon, your legs were just beat up after that. And we talk to athletes now, and we talk to coaches. And they're able, I think one reason, some people are saying that records are being broken because of the foams and the plates and this. And the other argument is, no, they're being broken because people can train harder and recover faster. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a two-part thing. I think the basic notion of recovery after a long run, if you run in a foam shoe or a foam and plate shoe, you feel different, right? It used to be like you'd run a long 16 miler on Sundays, and then by Tuesday you'd still be dragging, right? And that whole DOMS experience would definitely be a real thing. And now it's you can feel actually pretty lively and pretty good after that 16 miler, and you recovered and feel better on Monday, so then you can train harder on Tuesday if that's your workout day. I also think that the notion of doing something like a 30K hard-ish progression run, right, is much more of a piece that is performance-oriented training, right? That is going into that component of marathon training, and that goes for the elite runners and everyone else, right? And I really think that the recovery aspect and recovery into training are as much of a factor as just the race day propulsion.
Do you think so? One of the quote trends that we kind of saw at TRE this year was the notion that we're going back to this minimalist design style shoe. We didn't necessarily see any.
Would you say back to minimalist or more like pendulum swing back to lower stack?
Yeah, just I guess lower stack is. Do you think that's what we're going to see in the future?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, prior to this year, we saw obviously a lot of training shoes get 2 to 4 millimeters more of stack, right? And so that became a thing. And I think that's worked for some people. I think that just in the notion of running, I think that feeling the ground is a good thing, or feeling more of the ground is a good thing. That if you can use more of your instinctual kind of connection to whatever the surface is to propel yourself, I think that's going to cue good running form. And so personally, I think that some of the super high stack shoes can be a little bit I don't know, just blocking to what to really get running. Sometimes you just go out in a high stack shoe and you're
dulling your senses.
Yeah, the shoe will do the work for me, or the shoe but then I feel am I really running with good gait and everything else, or am I just kind of plodding along, So to answer your question, yeah, I mean, obviously I saw some of those shoes as well. I think that's certainly a factor of maybe two things. A couple of years ago, before the Saucony Elite came out, the Endorphin Elite, they had that kind of cut down version of that. I guess it was the first Elite that Jared wore that whatever that race in the mine they did in Germany. But I think that they're discovering too that there's different stack heights probably produce different levels of engagement. I think we're still in that point of understanding what's going to be best in terms of performance. And also, as we know from running shoes, it's marketing too, right? I mean, like the reason high stack shoes are becoming a thing is because every other brand is doing it, right? And every other brand's got to keep up, and the foams are better, so that's why we're going up. But then as soon as somebody says, "Oh, we've got a lower stack version," like it's going to trend. So that the copycat trends in running are pretty prevalent, and that's going to continue as well. So I'm sure we'll see more of those, to a point.
Yeah, my feeling is it has to really depend on foam technology. Like I think the next big breakthrough would probably be less foam that feels as soft and cushy and bouncy as these 40 millimeter stacks. Like if you could get a 10 millimeter stack to feel underfoot like a 40 millimeter, that would be the real breakthrough, because you'd have that low, quick to the ground feel, but your foot would still feel protected and stuff like that. I have no idea how they would do that, but that's
well. I mean, like, but look at the Pro Evo 1. I mean, like, I think Adi is it. I mean, that foam obviously is super light, right? And I think every runner would appreciate super light for the course of a marathon or a long run. The challenge with getting super light up until recently has been like, oh, it's too low to the ground, it's too minimal, things like that, right? And so I agree. So if you had a foam with compression values that allow it to be light and low, but still have a the compression value of a thicker shoe, that's the secret sauce. And maybe that's part of what the Pro Evo 1 has done, right? I mean, like I think we're still in this period of like the science is ahead of us and we're catching up to it and putting it into shoes, it's which is exciting for sure. I think that if we keep seeing the sharp end of the spear getting faster and that's cueing like more changes, I mean, we're still in like this crazy, renaissance of running shoe performance.
Yeah, I feel like, and I know Megan will probably agree with me, there's a technology that has nothing to do with foam that is probably my favorite sensation in a fast day shoe, and that's the AirPods in the or the Alpha Fly, especially in the Alpha Fly 3. Like, is that an area you feel like the shoe companies are so busy chasing what we already have, they're not looking to different technologies that may be outside of foams that could benefit runners?
I mean, I think that question leads to, within the space, there's innovative companies, and then there's a lot of companies that just chase trends, right? And so I think that you're always going to see brands working behind the scenes in their research labs. I mean, chasing new things or new ideas and stuff that never comes to fruition either, right? I mean, there's been a handful of things that have kind of come and gone that people never talked about. But like, I do think that we'll continue to see, more than just foam and plate. Obviously the Vaporfly Vaporfly and Alpha Fly both changed the game, and people have followed those, right? So Nike is always an innovator, right? Partially because they have the money, the commitment for that. Adidas is back in the game. They were for a long time not in the game, but they're back in the game, and so it's pretty easy to identify kind of who the innovators are. And there's also like plenty of brands that are trying to innovate and push forward. I mean, the Puma Faster 2, that plate is cool because it extends beyond the toe. I think we're going to see small things like that could make a difference, right, if they work. So I think that while there are true innovators, there are also every brand benefiting from what everybody knows and all the foams that are out there. But I think that there's certainly going to be brands that are going to be trying to push for different pieces that make sense, right? And the more the data informs design and performance results, the more we're going to learn, and that's where it's going to continue to take off.
Okay, so the bubble gum lip on the Fast R that you just mentioned, on the Fast R2, you feel that is a benefit? Like, I'm trying to figure out, is that actually a benefit or is that a gimmick? Like, couldn't the shoe just extend out, like the toe of the shoe extend out over that? Like, what's the deal with it?
Wait, can we set that question again? We froze here.
Okay, so I'm saying, can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. So the shoe itself, to me, I can't tell if that's a gimmick or not, because I feel like you could just extend the material over that toe and it would just have a normal pointy toe like a running shoe would have. So with it bumped out with that bumper there and it exposed, to me, that's like, hey, we're different. We're doing things different. and trying to like visible technology show off the shoe. Do you feel that that is actually a benefit and is creating a benefit to the runner?
I guess we'll find out. I mean, I think you're right, and you hit on something there. I mean, visible technology. You know, Nike started that with the airbag back in the '80s, and then and ASICS followed with that. And like again, those weren't necessarily huge performance values, but they were to be sold, right? They were. It was cool at retail to look like, oh, look at the airbag, right? And so that, yeah, that could very well be that too. I think that the proof will come in, you know, marathon results, right? Maybe the Olympic trials and other things, but I think that it'll be those things that brands are trying to do that extend themselves. And, you know, Puma says they test it in their lab and everything else. So, you know, but we'll see, right? There's been plenty of other shoes that have been claimed to be something that maybe have not. And the other thing too is it's, you know, it's like, obviously Puma has a pretty good stable of really good athletes. But that you know, the result of that, like even like the Under Armour shoe in New York City Marathon, right? That won the New York City Marathon a year and a half ago, but that doesn't mean that was an exceptional shoe, right? It's hard to put like
the runner versus the shoe
versus the shoe on the race day, and like, you know, there's so many things. Ultimately, in a fast race or a elite race, it's still going to come down to the athlete and all the things they bring to the table. And maybe all the shoes are the same, right? At that point, you know, it's like it's hard to say, but yeah. So I think it's interesting. I think, you know, the marketing and selling of technology or gimmicks or visible technology has been a big part of running forever, right? And it still is. And like, you know, hopefully now we do have more ways of getting results or data, but I think that certainly that's still part of the game.
Well, it's always interesting to me when they say they test the shoes, and we did it in the lab, because typically they're testing against maybe one or two competitors and their own shoes. And again, you're depending, like you said, on the athlete. So I'm looking at the VO2 max of, say, Molly Seidel, and I'm going to put her in the DV8 Elite 2. I'm going to put her in the Fast R2, and I'm going to see, okay, which one is she doing, performing better in, knowing that she can't choose the other brand's shoes. So why test her? Why test that shoe on her when you don't want her going, oh, geez, you know what? I really like X brand over here.
I think what would be cool is if somehow we could have an independent, you know, pretty deep dive in a pretty high end lab shoe test, right? That really spelled out all the performance of all, you know, maybe this, you know, same group of 20 runners testing all these different shoes for the same test. I think you'd really get an eye-opening set of results, right? That would be maybe hopefully unbiased. I mean, even the Nike study, the 4% study at CU in Boulder, was, you know, a pay to play kind of study that Nike produced, and then they, you know, had, oh, look, it's 4%, like they named their shoe after, right? It was all too convenient. But even behind the scenes of that, it was you know, a biased study, right? So I think that I agree that studies are based on what a brand wants it to be or what they paid for that, you know, either internally or externally, what they wanted the results to be, right? And I suppose if there's results that are on the other direction, that you'd never see those, right? So, but it would be cool to have a super high level lab test that showed data, right? You know, every year, and it could be the Believe in the Run, you know, $1 million shoe lab you're building, but
do it.
But on the backside of that, I think too, though, that also takes away from, you know, this whole touchy-feely run experience where
that's the thing I love.
Where you as a runner know best what feels good for you, right?
Yeah.
That's important.
Well, it's funny because you know, when we talk to Lab Rat Run and he tests shoes, a lot of times like I'll intuitively feel a certain way about a shoe. Like I'll put it on and this is my gut on this shoe. And then I love it when there is testing. And again, he doesn't do, like you're talking about, really, really, really deep dive. It's a smaller.
It's him.
Well, and a couple colleagues and stuff. But but I like it when the test sort of matches my gut. You know, it's an ego thing. Anyway, but it brings up a good question though. We are now getting into this. Okay, you have super shoes. They're designed for elite athletes, people who are running 2-hour, 9-minute marathons, maybe even faster. And this shoe is the maximum that they can get out of themselves. They test it. They say, this is the right shoe for that. And then they release it to the market, and average guy, 330, 4 hour, whatever, they're going and they're saying, okay, yeah, I also feel a benefit from this shoe. Now, it could be placebo effect. It could just be better cushioning, better quality, you know, foams underfoot, lighter weight uppers. In your opinion, do you think that the average runner is getting the benefit from super shoes? Do you think we should be spending our $250, our $300, say Evo one $500? Should that average person be buying a super shoe?
Do you want me to bring down the industry right now, or what?
Yeah, do
it. I think that certainly, you know, the marketing and upscaling of super shoes is a real thing. And I think certainly at some level, if you take that 330 to 4 hour marathoner running in a shoe that's lighter with better foam, are they benefiting from it? Probably on the face of it, yes, right? Is it specifically helping a performance oriented gait, meaning someone who runs 220 or 230 versus the gait that's running 330 or 4? Maybe not as much. Or if you look at a more distinct heel striking gait, I mean, some of the shoes, yes, some of them no. I mean, that's the thing too, that every one of these super shoes runs and feels different, right? And the foam and how it interacts with your gait is different. So, I can't say that no. I think there's definitely probably a plus. I mean, for most runners, but I think most runners have to just determine that for themselves, right? I mean, if you ran, say, Berlin in 348 and ran, New York in 323 or 330, something comparable in different shoes. I mean, what's the exact variable that changed there, right? I mean, who knows? There's so many different things. I do think that getting back to the recovery notion and all that, I think the value of super shoes is not again just that improvement of time or over 26.2 miles. It's so much more than that. So, I mean, I think all runners have benefited. I think that, of course, brands are going to say oh, it's going to benefit everybody too, right? I don't know. I mean, most of us aren't chasing 201 or 2 flat or whatever. So,
Megan here.
Well, Megan, yeah, she's in a different case for sure. But I think that we've all benefited, again, compared to shoes over the arc of 20 years or even, pre boost. So I think that we've all benefited. I think that certainly there's been a intentional, again, upscaling of price and everything else, which is awkward because now shoes are really expensive, right? I mean,
well, you can't, I think it's also psychological. Like if you agree that Nike set the bar with the Vaporfly 250 and they're like, this is the best running shoe. And then you come out with your best running shoe and you're like, it's 180. There is a psychological component, I think, to runners where we're like, it's probably not as good. It's not 250.
Yeah. The premium product for sure. But I always tell people, and I actually really like still the Brooks Launch, which is $100 or maybe 110 now. But I mean, if you want a shoe that can do everything for that runner, that's still a good shoe too, right? I mean, it's just a understanding of what you want, what you need, and also maybe what you aspire to too. I mean, there's plenty of people that will, go out and buy high-end stuff, cars and clothes and everything else, and people that want to just get by with what they, the more basic stuff. And so,
H&M.
Right. And so I think, getting back to this point though, that every brand has said, oh yeah, it works for the 2 hour marathoner, it works for the 4 hour marathoner. But then I think that one of the first brands of shoes that have really said, hey, this shoe is different is that new Salomon S-Lab Spectre, right?
Yeah.
Which they believe is more geared toward the 3 to 5, I think the 3 to 5 hour marathoner, what they said.
803 pace is what they are saying is ideal for it.
Which
puts someone like myself in a tough spot because some days I'm going to run an 803 for a marathon, and some days I'm going to run, a 749. It's like, right. And do I want to be in the shoe for,
well, that's
psychologically
the hardest part of that shoe for
slower.
me was how do you convince someone to take a shoe that isn't for the top performer? Like, I totally get what they're trying to do there, and I think it makes complete sense. But in my mind, I'm still like, if I want to run as fast as I possibly can, why wouldn't I choose the shoe that is technically the best?
Right. We all aspire to be the greatest possible version of us, right? And if
kids don't wear Jordans thinking that they're going to dunk, they wear them because hopefully there'd be, basketball look cool.
I never had Jordans, but I could also like almost barely touch the rim with my
3-inch. But you were up there.
There he was up there, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love that the S-Lab Spectre. I find to be a super enjoyable shoe to run in. It's probably one of my favorite recent shoes that I can think of. Once they gave it to us at the running event, I wore it for like 2 weeks straight just because I just really enjoyed the shoe. Yeah. I don't feel necessarily fast in it, but a lot of the times I wasn't trying to do speed work in it. Right. But it felt good and it feels right. So I get that part, but it is psychologically for me. I think I would still be like, who knows? Maybe I'm going to blow the doors off and run a 209 today. I need to have the Alpha Fly on. But,
I've run that shoe a bunch, and like I think the longest I've run is like 8 or 10 miles. But it definitely feels smooth and rolling and like efficient. But whether I would choose that at 26 miles, to run a fast-ish or a faster marathon, I don't know. I mean, like certainly, we're all enticed by Vaporfly and Alpha Fly and all these like things we know that are like these bright, shiny things. Right. And I think it'll be hard for Salomon to market that, even if the technology is proven and works. Right. It's just a different, it's contrary to what we know of all this top down marketing.
Yeah. So let's take it from there to and we don't need a brand. It's more like what attributes in a running shoe do you feel like if you were to build a running shoe or, kind of think of the perfect shoe for you, how does that come together? What does it look like?
I mean, I think even without building, I mean, I think fit is first. I mean, how it fits my foot. I have pretty narrow feet, and so that's going to be the biggest thing. Even if I'm just building one shoe for me, because that's going to dictate everything about how I feel in that shoe. I do think that like kind of a medium stack height relative to what we know now is what I like better. I like to feel the ground, and that goes for both trail or roads. Sometimes when I'm in high stack shoes, like I said, I just don't feel like I'm part of the experience. Like the shoe is like, driving me and everything else. So I think it's somewhere it's like, it's probably, a 34 in heel, maybe 30 in the forefoot kind of shoe, a springy bounce to it. Probably not for an everyday training shoe, probably not a plate. I've definitely experienced the more I've worn plated shoes to train in, I've had some weird, like, forefoot numbness and like just a lot of things that I'm like, I'm not sure that like I should be doing this, as an N=1 kind of study. I've definitely become leery of like training in carbon plated shoes, and so I think that like, somewhere under 9 ounces, 8.5 ounces, 8 ounces would be great. Again, getting super light. I love light, but at the same time, that has often meant like too little shoe, right? So there's definitely for me, there's a too little shoe and too much shoe that you have to really kind of maneuver through. Like I love the Speedland guys and what they're doing, but like the newer shoe to me is mostly too much shoe for a lot of things, right? I love the technology. I love the double BOA connectivity. And on a gravel road or a dirt trail, it's a really good shoe. But as soon as you get on a little bit more technicality, like that becomes too much shoe. And I can say that about a lot of shoes. Like you can sense somewhere like, oh, that's too much shoe, right? And that is the magic though of a lot of these super shoes, that when you're out there racing at race speed, you kind of forget all that because it's such a flowy, like bouncy, like it's weird. But training I think is different too though. So I definitely like to feel the ground and feel that I'm part of the action,
All right. So in that you brought up Speedline, but Norda, they kind of are, instead of reinventing their shoe every year to market a different shoe, they have their 001 and now they have the 002, which is sounds to me, I really like the 001, but it sounds to me like you would probably prefer the 002, which is a lower stack.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I've run in the 001, and again, I appreciate what they're doing. I like it, but I don't love it necessarily. Again, because same thing. I do think that the lower stack, and I haven't been in the 002, but I think the lower stack for me, slightly lower, is going to be something I appreciate more. You know, I did like, for example, a lot of the ASIC shoes that got thicker over the last year. The key to that was obviously the foam being good enough to allow that to happen. But even with some of those, I was like, oh, that's a lot of foam, right? So I don't know. I think that comes down to personal preference for runners.
Yeah, because I still like the Tribuco Max 2 or whatever. That to me, I was just going out for a like 10-mile run and ended up doing 20 miles because I just felt like my legs just felt so good, and I was like, I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you prefer, and let's say you're also on the trails that you're on. It's a different type of trail out in Boulder. Like what's the surface in the trails like?
Yeah, so most of like Boulder, Colorado in general, like it's a lot of like hard rock, you know, granite, and like just angular, you know, ground and everything else. And so the challenge with running trails with a high stack shoe is they become very tippy, right? And so especially with some of those initial plated versions of trail shoes that we saw in 2021 and early 2022, a lot of those shoes, because they had singular plates, as soon as they go over. And so I've never rolled my ankles much as I did in 2022. Seriously, I was like just going over all the time and spraying. And like, you know, the Tecton X and now Tecton X2 certainly changed that, because there's, even with the parallel plates, right, there's a little bit more give within the midsole, and you're not as levered as much. You know, I think that
I didn't even think about that.
What was that Saucony Endorphin Edge, I think, was the first one that was really like this staunch piece that, like, as soon as it was going somewhere, it's going all the way over.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a place for plates for sure, and foam. I just think that as you're running on more technical terrain, you've got to be able to be part of that connection with the ground and feel that. I think, but that's the thing. Running trails is different in every different region, right? You know, in the Southwest, it's sandy and dry, and in Colorado and the Rockies, it's very rocky. In places in the Northeast or northern Midwest, it's very mushy and wet all the time. Like it's never wet running in Colorado, but it's very rocky and angular, you know?
Yeah, ours is like, I feel like I've run in California, I've run in Colorado, and I've run on the East Coast. It's kind of like skiing. We have the shittiest trails of the three, and then Colorado probably has some of the sweetest, and then California has, to me, the most, almost like, they're beautiful trails. They're just nice, buffed out.
Yeah, I'll give you that. But yeah. if you can, I grew up skiing in the Midwest, and so the Midwest, or even worse, the Northeast, if you can ski there, you can ski anywhere, right? And so
exactly, yeah.
At that point, if you can run trails there, you can run trails anywhere, right? I mean, I've only run trails in New England a few times, but like it's a different thing entirely, right? And like I never have the notion of like soggy, wet feet much, unless I'm crossing a river in Colorado. But like New England was a mucky, wet, sloppy experience, and fun, but
and just
different.
Roots, rocks, wash out,
everything.
Yeah, interesting. Meg, I know you probably want to get some details on top shoe picks.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, since we're on trails, give us your overall. Like, if you had 3 trail shoes to pick,
any time period.
Yeah. What are we going with?
So one of the shoes I always liked that is like 2002 shoe. It was the Nike Air Tupu, which was kind of a low to the ground with a little bit of foam. You know, Nike's better foams kind of trail shoe that had you know, kind of you know, some grip to it. I think we're seeing that now coming out in like a similar shoe, like the Brooks Catamount Agile. It was going to be a cool shoe, I think. So that was cool. I think I definitely was into the Hoka Speed Goat when it first came out. And then I wouldn't say not so much anymore, but there's been so many other shoes that have done really well. I don't think of a third shoe. I do think the new Merrill. I can't think of the name of it right now, but the two shoes that came out last year were really strong. I can't think of the name of them, but so those are probably 3 of the shoes I've probably in my recent
Speaking of the Speed Goat, how many times do people ask you if you're related to Carl there?
So it's Carl Meltzer and Brian Metzler. And this has been going on for 20 years since I first met him. And we always laugh about it. Like, and I literally explained it at one race thing, like, okay, Carl Meltzer is the guy that runs fast and Brian Metzler is the guy that writes about him, so yeah, I mean, people do ask about it a lot, or they'll be like, I'll find somebody, not so much anymore, but in the industry, people would be calling me Carl, or
that'd be awesome.
I'll take that. I'll take all those 100-mile wins, So
yeah. And a shoe named or collaborating on a shoe. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, I mean, the original signature shoe, right? The Speed Goat, right?
Yeah. Are you on the road? You got to be running the roads in Boulder as well. I mean, you can't always be on the trails. So what would be your top 3 road shoes?
Top 3 road shoes. I'm trying to think what's in my relative scope of things. I think in terms of my go-to for the last couple of years has been the Endorphin Speed, right? Whatever version we're on now, the 2 and the 3, I think certainly have been great. I've run in those a lot. I think in terms of kind of a super shoe, I think the Adidas Pro 3 has been really my kind of go-to. I feel good and smooth in that. I think some of the Nike shoes initially were too soft and too bouncy. And then I'm trying to think what other shoe. I have to think about my.
I'm gonna interrupt you before you get to the last one here. So you just said that you don't like running in plates, but the Endorphin Speed has a plate, but it's not a carbon fiber plate. Is it soft enough that you feel that?
I think so. I mean, I run in, so I'll run in the Endorphin Pro, the Elite, and those obviously are much more snappy. I just think that what the Speed offers is that really good foam, that really good resilient foam with some level of plate, right? It's whatever that material is, nylon or whatever. It has some flex to it, but it has some. It's a nice midpoint of having some kind of
stiffening agent,
propulsive bounce to it, right? Without being that sharp. I mean, I think some of those shoes that are pretty race specific. It's almost like a race blade, right? It's it's pretty harsh, So. I think the Hoka Mach shoes. I think we're on 5 or 6 now. I think those have been pretty good, which blend a version of that. And then you step up to the Mach X. I just think that again, for me, I've become a little bit leery of running in plated shoes. It does feel great, but also I think there's a backside to that too that we're maybe not yet aware of.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll find out. I will say that both the shoes that you mentioned, and we'll get to your last one there. The Endorphin Speed, I haven't been a fan of, but I just got the 4 and I've been running in those. I have probably 30 miles in them and I absolutely adore them. I think that I don't know why, maybe it just softened up the foam just a touch or something, but this is the first one that I'm like, okay, I get the hype. This is a great shoe. And then did you get a chance to see the Adidas Pro 4 at the running event?
Yep.
I like the Pro 3, like you just said, and I like how that Adidas is saying we're not going to release a new shoe until we have they're not just doing, okay, let's just tweak the upper and throw another one out so that we have a 4. I really do feel like they're doing the iterations when they have something to benefit that it's slightly better or better. And I'm excited about Pro 4.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that maybe ASICS has been the same way too. The Metaspeed Sky Plus, I mean, they have a different naming convention. So it's you can't really call it a 2 or a 3, but I think that they're the same way maybe, where it's less about changing to change, but obviously changing for performance, which is cool.
Yeah. And so, okay, so that you gave us 2, Endorphin Speed, the Adidas Pro.
So, the Hoka Mach is definitely one, but I think another one that actually worked well for me of the speed shoes is certainly the Rocket X, Rocket X2. I think that's been good. I just feel better in that. It is a little bit bouncier shoe, but I mean, and here's the thing, and you guys know this, running every day in different shoes, right, is a fun and also challenging experience because you don't get back to the shoes you love as much as you would like, right? I mean, I think that this whole advent of shoe testers, bloggers, personalities, we all go through the same thing, right? Because we're all kind of on this cadence of there's a new shoe, and so I donate a lot of shoes, every month that I stopped using, but I'm like, oh, which one's the ones I want to hang on to, right? And like,
Yeah.
it's this weird problem of like never running enough in the shoes that you love because there's always more shoes to run in, and that's just part of what we do, by default.
Well, that's my favorite thing is that's how I can tell if I love the shoe when there's a break or a lull and I don't have to choose a shoe and I stand in front of the wall. And I usually like to try to keep at least one version prior so that when the next shoe comes out, we can compare it. If it's a total dud or I feel neutral about it, yeah, I'll donate them. But if it's like a shoe that I'm like, okay, this is an important shoe. I feel like the Mach's a good example of that. I was like, when they finally got it to, I believe it was like the third version or so, I was like, okay, this is a fun shoe now. When the next one comes out, I want to be able to compare what they do differently to it. But we do get back, and I keep an eye on Megan because I can really tell, like, okay, what shoe did she really like? Because she's putting on like double-digit miles when she was training for a CIM. So it was like, how many miles a week? Like 90 miles a week. And I'm like, oh, what daily trainer is she going to choose for her easy run when her legs are beat up and not feeling good and she doesn't have to review a shoe? It was kind of fun to watch that it happened to be our top picks for daily trainers and stuff like that.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, and like, as I said recently, is like, there's so many good shoes, right? There's a lot of very good shoes. There's not as many like total dogs or bad ones.
Give me the last dog you reviewed.
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Maybe I wouldn't want to throw somebody under the bus, but I think that like, because of that, like, then it comes down to fine tuning personal preference of like, oh, I like, the New Balance 1080 V13. I like that, but this is a little bit softer. Like, and you can really, and we're fortunate to have this opportunity, but you can really fine tune the difference between shoes. And like, I think that maybe some runners are starting to find that out. It's harder, obviously, unless you have access to all these shoes or try on experience. But certainly there are a lot of really good shoes out there, and I mean, it's a good problem to have in the industry and in as runners. I mean, there's not a lot of ways to go really wrong, I think, at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like you brought up the 1080 V13 and the Nimbus 2526. I feel like they're right around each other.
Yeah.
And it really does come down to a slight nuance in like how you feel that energy return or how maybe the upper fits or something like that.
Yeah, I think, but again, getting back to my point, I mean, so many people still shop by brand or by color, which is great because like running shoes are more than just this thing. And there's this personal bit of self-expression too, and so the beauty of that is like there's, most brands have a good offering of shoes, right? And like we could debate we could put 8 super shoes on the table and go out and test them. And even if data says this or that, we're still going to come back with our own personal preferences, So that's the whole rub of this whole thing. Again, like I love high-end data research, and but again, I love the idea that when you go to run in that shoe, or each of you run the same shoe, it's going to be slightly different, and yet you're going to feel this emotional or whatever it is, brain to foot connection. I like to say that you get like a learned foot, right? Because your foot knows certainly what you like, and right away you can put a shoe on and go, yes, this is going to work, or no, it's not going to work, right?
Well, we do, even as a shoe reviewer, I find myself biased sometimes by brand. Like I'll give you an example. I think one of the brands that did the most to bring new foams into the space was Skechers with the supercritical foam. Kurt and that team brought in this foam that was really good. I think that other people were hesitant because the foam felt cheap. Like it doesn't feel like a luxurious material in your hands.
Right.
And their design isn't always a hit. So,
well, I would say also the brand itself isn't exactly known in the performance.
But then you put that foam into the Hyperion, Tempo and these other shoes, and all of a sudden it's, becomes more desirable, and you see other brands playing with it, and it's kind of proliferated. There's almost a supercritical foam in every shoe lineup now. That when I used to say, like I'd be running, I said, if I don't look down and this had a Nike swoosh on it or something like that, I would think this was the greatest shoe ever. But I do have to take off points for the fact that I don't like, it's like riding a moped. You didn't want to be seen in public on it. You know?
No, that's a good point. Long ago, when I was younger, I used to test skis. I used to be part of the skiing magazine test team, you know, and they used to get the skis from the manufacturers with a white top sheet, right? So you wouldn't know what it was. You could see the bindings, but the bindings weren't tied to the brand of the skis. And so you'd ski it and you'd be like, oh, what is, you know, and it was a really great way to objectively test a ski and how it performed, right? If we could do that with shoes, it would be amazing. It would be impossible to do because even if you had like a factory designed version of an all white shoe with no logos, you'd still know what it was, right? You'd still be able to see it. The tooling of it would be obvious. But yeah, I mean, I think that like getting back to Skechers, I think Skechers, you know, has put out a lot of good shoes. The foams have been really good, and they've actually been ahead of the game in some spaces. But certainly Skechers gets a rap for being this kind of quirky brand that is like this mall shoe thing for, you know, moms and walkers and all that stuff.
Well, but shape ups and stuff like that. Some of the marketing of their non-performance shoes clearly is. Yeah,
but I think Skechers has put out some good shoes. I think that, like, you know, in another stretch, I mean, Salomon has had a tough time getting into road shoes, right? Because they're so known as a mountaineering and trail running brand, right? And so I think every brand brings with it a reputation of how we interpret that, you know. And Nike Trail for years, Nike Trail until the Vaporfly, what's it called, the Ultrafly, yeah. They had a lot of good intent, but they had a lot of slippery rubber shoes. You know, they said they were sticky rubber, but until they got Vibram, they weren't, to me, really a player, even though they had athletes and they had marketing. And so every brand has like this reputation or kind of biases that we all have that, like, you know, that we have to maneuver or accept or just indulge in, right? I mean, you know, for years, New Balance had the dad shoe thing, right? And New Balance puts out some pretty good shoes, and I think that the Super Comp V4 is going to be a great shoe, for example, you know, with a full P-boat foam. But like, every time we lace up a shoe, there is some kind of inherent connection or bias or belief that we have personally.
Yeah, well, I think they you know, when we were growing up, to be called a geek or a nerd was a bad thing, and it kind of shifted in the culture. I feel like dad shoes have also kind of shifted. I like currently right now I'm wearing a pair of gel NYCs from Asics that, you know, a couple of years ago I think they were the ugliest thing on the planet, but now I'm like, oh yeah, they bring back the memories of the early 2000 running shoe, and I'm like, yeah. Nimbus 3, I like it.
Nostalgia rules today, and you're a dad anyway, so it's like, you know,
it works.
Once you get over once I got over my daughter making fun of me for stuff, I'm like, okay, I think they're cool. You know, that's a definition of a dad shoe right there.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Brian, I know we're already over an hour here, so we won't keep you any longer, but thanks for coming on and being super nerdy and chatting shoes with us. And,
again, nerdy in a good way.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing. I love
it. And like, I'll say one more thing, and I've said this to you guys a couple of times, sometimes over the influence of alcohol at bars, but I love what you guys do, because I think you guys more than anybody have made the shoe testing genre a brand, a thing, right? And I think that's cool, because like, I've come in from a straight editorial background, and some other people come in from a personality, and you guys have plenty of personality, but I think you guys have done a great job of making this whole genre, this branded thing, making it real, right? And again, I love all the people in this space, but I love what you guys do, because your character development, right, allows people to connect with how you feel about shoes, right? And it's very authentic, but it's also very real, right? I feel like I'm talking to, when I listen to you guys, when I see your stuff, I feel like I'm in like my local running group, like looking down, like, oh, cool, and hearing real stuff. So props to you guys.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it, especially coming from someone who I consider a legend in the industry. So, you know, it's nice. You know, you probably feel the same way. Once you write something, you're like, is anybody reading this? Or, you know, you put stuff out and you're like, I hope somebody gets something out of this.
Yep.
But cool. Awesome.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Brian.
All right, thanks, Brian.